Dude, do you know the legendary item drop rate's bugged? What? No!
Yeah, probably. Ladies and gentlemen, class balance all over the fucking place. And there's no surprise to anyone, well, despite those who were completely convinced that it was just RNG leading to people of your guild having 3 legendaries, while others had none. There was obviously a bug there. There was obviously a bug, right? There was obviously a problem. But we were kind of hanging on to see if Blizzard were going to acknowledge it or whether they're going to put their head in the sands and kind of go, no, it's fine, while secretly fixing it. So they did acknowledge it, which is good news for everybody, that it was bugged, and if you got the first legendary, if you were lucky enough to get your first one early on, then you got an increased chance of getting the next one, and the next one. There's a few people in our guild who have 3 now. Lots and lots and lots of people who have 2, and then there's all the people like me and Mr. Ghost who have none, which is a bit of a pisser. Not only that, we also have all the class balancing issues and another post that has come out today saying they're going to wait until after raiding. So we're going to talk about those things today because people are getting a little concerned, especially because most of us who watch my shows are into the raiding scene, and we know that class balance could be a real fucking problem. Especially if you've chosen your main, you're early in Legion, you've invested a lot of time into the early game, you've got your AP up. You can't obviously reinvest your AP into a different weapon, so a little bit cautious and concerned about what's going to actually happen. So let's tackle these things one at a time, shall we? The legendary situation. I think the problem we've got here is that definitely some people had multiple chances to get their best in slot legendaries. As you've seen, if you've looked into it a little bit, which I'm sure most of you have access to some really bad legendaries that are just garbage, absolutely terrible. But you also have access to ones that are really fucking good. So it's not a case that people got more legendaries, right? Sooner enough, in about a month's time or a bit less, you'll be able to equip 2 legendaries, which is a thing. But, the problem is the more legendaries you got, the higher chance to get the really, really defining ones that actually will make your class and your character considerably better than those of your peers. And that is a definite problem going forward for some people. Overall, this isn't a big deal. It's not a big deal. It's a big deal from your personal perspective, definitely, but unless you're very top end, no one's really going to be start kicking your ass because you don't have a legendary. And if you're in the pug world, chances are it's not going to make much of a difference. The only issue we have there now is that Blizzard can't take those legendaries away from people who got multiple, right? They can't do that. That's not fair. How do you decide? Do you say, well, it was the last 2, well, that's bullshit, I got them to drop, it was your bug, and so on and so forth. They can't really do that. That would cause massive problems and only satisfy the bitter people. I think the only people who'd be really happy if people lost the legendaries that they've managed to acquire would be the bitter people who hate anybody getting more than they have. From my perspective, I don't have any, and I don't particularly care, and I certainly don't want to see other people lose theirs. The issue we have now is now they've fixed it, or they say they fixed it, although many people are claiming that it's not even fixed yet, is that it's actually put many people months and months behind reaching something that people have managed to get in 2 weeks, as you're supposed to have a diminishing returns effect on getting your legendaries, meaning you should get 1 within reason, and then you should have much, much longer to get a second one, and then that process repeats. So if you've already got 3 in the 3 decent ones, well, congratulations, because you are months ahead in this system than other people could ever possibly catch up to you. You are crazily far ahead. And the cry from people saying, can you just boost us to get our first one? If that's possible, I don't think that's unreasonable to kind of make sure everybody has 1 going into the first raids. But again, it depends on which legendary you're going to get, right? If they boost it, you get a shit one, and then you're like, oh god. Is there any real way of solving this problem? No, not really. It's something we're going to have to live with, and that's a real pisser for a lot of people. Ultimately, it shouldn't really affect you. Are you going to lose your raid spot? Probably not, unless you're really bleeding edge. And most of those guys were rolling. If you're in the real bleeding edge, the likelihood is you had multiple of the same class anyway to get higher chance on the right legendaries. So overall, I think it's just a thing that people are going to kick up a big fuss about. It's a little bit annoying for sure. It's something that made a lot of people very bitter. When we started seeing the same person get multiple legendaries, there was definitely angst there, understandably so. People who have ran every world quest, their mythics loads of times, loads and loads of heroics, not got a single one, yet you're seeing this guy get 3 And then you're thinking, what the fuck is going on here? This clearly is not right. This isn't the way it's supposed to be. So yeah, the angst and stuff is understandable, but I think at this point we have to kind of accept it and move on realistically, and just hope it doesn't have a major impact. Although I can't really see it have any impact unless you're very, very top end, or in the pug world where people might be asking for a minimum of a legendary, but that's on you. If you choose to take part in those kind of groups, right? That's on you to do that. Moving on to more serious stuff, though, is the class balancing situation. There are clearly some classes that are underperforming, some that are overperforming. And Blizzard has said they're not going to balance it yet. We knew this was happening in beta. If you follow my channel, yeah, it was pretty clear. There were some classes that were way behind. And we kept suggesting things that would make it better, right? But they seemingly went ignored. And the problem Blizzard's got now, and why they're waiting until after the first rating, is there are so many factors to consider now that it's really difficult to gauge exactly where everybody is, because we're still in the early days where people are farming their artifact power to no end to try and max out one weapon before moving on to the other ones. And there are also people who are doing multiple artifact weapons. So you've probably realized by now your artifact weapons really skew your results. If you've got one weapon, like a fire mage would have his fellow Malone very heavily invested into, you switch over to Frost and stuff and or Arcane, you're miles behind de facto. You're miles and miles behind. However, if you then go against, say, a Warlock who are struggling, as we know, but still having to invest into multiple weapons. I know the Warlocks in our guild are getting 16, 16, 16 as a minimum in all three weapons. How do you balance it next door to each other? You can't, can you, really? And then we have the big fucking pisser on top of that, the relics. The relics. How are you taking two Moonkins who maybe have the same amount of artifact power invested into each other, but one has ridiculously good relics in, while the other one has something that three relics or a combination of relics that do absolutely nothing for them? If I've got my Fire Mage and I have ludicrous buffs to Ignite and Pyroblast, while the guy next to me has stuff that buffs his healing when he blinks, where's the balance there? How do we compare side by side? How much AP have you got? Do you have this natural bonus to this, or did you invest in multiple weapons? So it's very early in the progression of Legion to really decide where the balances come from and which characters and what stats are they using, what gearing have they got, what relics have they got, how much AP have they got in. Can we put these two side by side and see exactly what's going to be correct? Really difficult stuff. Not only mentioning, of course, what are the encounters going to throw at us? Are they going to be a combination of AoE, a combination of single target, raw single target, lots and lots of AoE, permanent cleave, short-term cleave burst? All these things need to be considered. Legion, as we said, pre-Legion, has a lot of issues to deal with. A lot of issues to deal with. Blizzard's going to have to make some tough choices now. Issues that they certainly knew were coming, such as, do we nerf an obviously overpowered spec compared to the others? So if we look at a mage, you say fire is the de facto choice. You won't see any mages that aren't fire, realistically speaking. Can we hammer fire into the ground after people have spent 100,000 plus AP in there? Not really. You can't really do that in the early stages of Legion. You can't just turn around and say, oh, that 100,000 plus artifact power that you've farmed since the game launched, waste of time now, because we've hammered fire baseline into the ground, and now everything else is much better in an overall view. You can't do that. People are just going to leave the fucking game because you just made them waste the first 3 weeks of their time, which is absolutely, you can't do that. That would put people in an awful position. So are they going to open up the option to move your AP from one weapon to the other? Are they going to crack on it this early? I expected to see it about mid-expansion. I don't know. But the balancing situation we're in now is fucking horrendous for Blizzard. Horrendous. It won't be, and a little respite to this, is it won't be later in the expansion. One, people have a weapon maxed out, and perhaps even two, because your research notes have started to stack up. Getting all those later tiers is no longer a big deal. You're getting thousands and thousands of AP from world quests, and it's all starting to stack up really nicely. Then it's not going to be such a big deal. People aren't going to be too asked about respecking, because the likelihood is they've already been investing in other artifact power weapons anyway. But right now, this is a real big problem for Blizzard. You can't really just hammer something into the ground and say, okay, but you always have the option of doing something else. Well, honestly, right now, no, I don't. I'm too heavily invested one way to go a different way. And you can't just decide just before or just after the raiding starts that this is a problem for you now. You can't do that. Do they have a legendary equipped? Do they have multiple, as it might be in a month's time? And how do we balance that? RNG loot, we've said it many times, doesn't really, especially RNG powerful loot that isn't somewhat balanced across the board, doesn't really belong in WoW. It belongs in games where you can keep farming it multiple times very, very easily, ergo Diablo. Doesn't really belong here because you can't work that way. Game doesn't work that way. In about 6 months-ish, or maybe less, this won't be as big of a deal as it's about to be when the raiding starts, and we'll start to get a bigger picture of just how broken everybody is. Are they broken? Because right now, a lot of people are comparing side by side with other specs, other classes. You're doing 5-mans where things die super quickly, so the numbers are all skewed all over the place. Very difficult to see what's actually happening right now, although it's pretty clear some are far behind. There's no doubt about that, and some are way ahead. Let's hope they don't knee-jerk, I think is the way we come out of this. Let's hope they don't knee-jerk and do something real crazy and fuck it all up. Alright? So there you go. Legendaries, balance. Fingers crossed, ladies and gentlemen. Fingers crossed. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.